We're very excited to be able to share our program with you all. In Australia, we always acknowledge the First Nations people of Australia, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and recognise their deep connection to country. We're sitting in Queensland on the Sunshine Coast, which is Gubbi Gubbi country. I also pay respect to the elders past, present and future, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I also want to acknowledge the wisdom and insight of those with lived experience, including those who may have thoughts of suicide, to take their own life, those who care for loved ones with thoughts of suicide, and those who may be bereaved from suicide. And I also want to acknowledge those lives that have ended due to suicide. With the understanding that suicide is a difficult subject, I want to reinforce the importance of self-care and looking after one another today and into the future. As in the introduction, first, I just want to apologise for Trent because he's unavailable due to personal reasons. But that means that we now have Karen, our standby General Manager. So I'll just let her introduce herself.
Thank you, Susan. So my name is Karen Phillips. I'm the General Manager of Standby Support After Suicide. I have been with Standby for over 8 years in a leadership capacity. And I've been part of the growth of Standby from a $2 million Australian dollar program to potentially over $12 million next financial year. I'm also a director on Suicide Prevention Australia, which is our peak body. Thanks, Susan.
Yep, and I'm Susan. I've been with Standby for around 12 years, first as a Standby team member and then as a regional coordinator, and now as the program manager at the Standby National. I thought we would begin by showing you a short video which talks about the Standby program, and it also gives some information on our most recent client outcomes research that we undertook in 2018.
Suicide impacts everyone. On average, there are 8 suicides a day in Australia. For every Australian that takes their own life, more than 100 people are impacted. That's approximately 300,000 Australians impacted each year. For many, the effects are long-lasting. Mental health concerns and social isolation can be significantly higher for those impacted. They are up to 8 times more likely to take their own life. But with the appropriate support, their risk can be reduced. Standby is Australia's leading provider in support after suicide. We offer free face-to-face or telephone support, connecting people to the most appropriate support in their local area, and provide follow-up contact for 24 months. We also provide free workshops to communities, building their capacity to support community members who have been impacted. An independent evaluation has shown that Standby support can help in a number of ways. By comparing the well-being of those supported by Standby with those that were not, it found people we supported within 12 months of their loss were 25% less likely to be at risk of suicide, 36% less likely to experience mental health concerns, and 22% less likely to experience a loss of social connections. They also reported fewer instances of difficulty sleeping, financial distress, family breakdown, or problems in the workplace, and found Standby support to be more effective than general healthcare services alone. Standby is currently available to 30% of Australia's population, delivered by partner organisations with local expertise to support the needs of their community. Our mission is for all Australians to have access to support after suicide. To find out more, including local contact details, visit our website at www.standbysupport.com.au. You can also join our online community on Facebook or Twitter.
As I said, that video was done in 2018, so it is a little outdated. There's now 9 deaths per day, suicide deaths per day in Australia. But with Standby, we don't tend to talk about numbers and statistics because we recognise that every death is one too many and leaves a great and wide impact on those people left behind. Also, there was a map there again that's a little outdated, and we're very excited to say that we are growing. And in the next slide or two, we'll show you our current map.
The Standby program began back in 2002 as a direct response to a local need. In a Sunshine Coast small community, there was a suicide. On the year anniversary of that suicide, 2 more family members took their own lives. As you'd expect, the community was devastated, and everyone was asking, how could this possibly have happened? The key stakeholders, our police, ambulance, and service providers, gathered to see what could be done and understand how this actually happened. What we found, it wasn't a lack of services and supports in the community, but rather a lack of coordination. In other words, everyone thought that everyone else was supporting the family, but sadly, the family fell through the cracks. So this situation led to the development of Standby. Standby is a community-based program dedicated to supporting individuals, groups, and communities across Australia who have been bereaved or impacted by suicide. From our very small beginnings in our local community, the program has grown substantially, and we have a great footprint across Australia. We are funded by the Australian government. Our vision, mission, and values have been developed in conjunction with our Lived Experience Advisory Group, as well as our coordinators across Australia. So, as I've said, we are funded nationally by the Australian government. We also align our Standby regions within a defined area by utilising the Australian government-funded primary health networks, where there are 31 of these primary health networks. Primary health networks are commissioned health services within a designated region, and they prioritise need and address identified gaps.
So on this map here, the teal colours are where there is a standby service, and the grey is where we do not currently, where we're currently unable to provide a service. So just to compare our two countries, in Australia we have 26 million people and 3.2 people per square kilometres. And if I'm right, in Lithuania there's approximately 3 million people and 43 people per square kilometre. So some of the areas we work within are even more sparsely populated. For example, in the Northern Territory, I'm not sure if you can see my pointer, but below Darwin there, Darwin's the capital of the Northern Territory, there's only 0.2 people per square kilometre. But in Sydney, we have 5 million people, and in Brisbane, we have 2 million people. So I've put this map together to show you how our service provision works across Australia. And you'll see that although we are considered a national program, we don't currently have that full national coverage. However, it's certainly something we're working towards, and we certainly hope to have achieved this in the near future. So just to start with, each region has a coordinator with a 24/7 mobile contact, and that coordinator acts as the central point of contact for suicide notifications and referrals and support for those who have been impacted. They are then responsible for the proactive support and coordination of support for their region. They're also responsible for building community awareness of the program and increasing the capacity of both services and general community members to understand the impacts of suicide, as well as what to do and what to say when they're supporting someone who's been bereaved or impacted. So as well as being the on-call face of standby, the majority of the work they do is in building relationships with key stakeholders and providing that professional development training as well as that community education training across the region. That is quite a large job. So depending on the size of the region, we have one or more outreach workers as well. And this role supports the coordinator in the provision of direct support, outreach, as well as support with regard to the community education and capacity building activities. The role is needed, as I said, due to the size of the regions and also to allow for sustainability in the coordinator's absence. Each site then has a pool of casual support team members. And the little yellow people I've got here is not indicative of the number. There may be more than that as well. So these team members usually have other jobs, or they may be students or people who may have retired, but people really with a capacity and availability of time and travel that the role may require. And we aim to have these support team members from diverse demographics, so that's gender identity, culture, age, as well as diverse geographics. So that means that they're spread throughout the region. Often these people are already working in the community service sector, and they're also like the eyes and ears of standby, and they're often a great, a source for us of knowing what's happening on the ground, as well as suicide notifications. And with a real push in Australia, and I think elsewhere, to have lived experience embedded in all aspects of the program, we're certainly aiming to ensure that each support team has people with lived experience on those teams. As I said, these casual team members are available on call to provide face-to-face support for anyone that's been impacted. And this is at a time and place requested by the person that's been impacted, and it's usually at their home. So we follow James and Gilliland's crisis intervention model of support. We do not wear a uniform or a badge. We don't take any notes, and we also don't use the word client. We follow a trauma-informed and a person-centred approach. So our six-step model, basically, the first step is listening to the individual story, letting them tell you where they are at and what is happening for them. Secondly, ensuring that we check safety. So that's both physical, psychological safety, and everyone that works for us has undergone our standby training, as well as the Living Works applied suicide intervention skills training as well. So we ask everyone that we work with whether they have thoughts of suicide, given the impact it has had on them. The third step is talking with people about what supports they have, and that usually comes out in the story that they're telling us. And then it is looking with them or letting them tell us what additional supports they may need and what connections we may be able to assist them with that might satisfy their needs. Then the fifth step, some simple steps that they will take on their personal journey, and then some steps that we will take to support them on that journey. And then we agree on those steps. We follow up at set intervals for 2 years, but the person that we have been supporting can call us back at any time.
In each of these regions, we partner with local non-government organisations to ensure that we have the infrastructure to support this diverse workforce. The community connection is needed, as we know that support is best provided by those who know and understand the community and the community members that they are supporting. Our team, which is the national standby team, functions in a commissioning role, meaning we don't actually do the service delivery, we don't do the work on the ground, but we partner with local organisations to deliver standby across Australia. This enables community ownership and utilisation of local knowledge to leverage the most cost-effective and outcome-focused method of delivering the standby program nationally. So we work on a national architecture approach with a regional application by harnessing what's already existing in the community. In each of these regions, we also have a local advisory group made up of key stakeholders for the region. So this includes our first responders, those with lived experience of suicide bereavement, and representatives from a range of cultural, our First Nations, education, business, local government, faith-based, and other specific groups such as the LGBTQI community and our seniors. So we are really aiming to have the representation of all the voices of the community we are working in. These groups meet 4 times a year to provide their expert advice, and they help with our strategic planning. Standby, for example, they could support us to be able to speak to the group of educators, and we can do some training for some school counsellors. These advisory groups also provide the opportunity for us to provide a support of our performance, as well as providing an opportunity of feedback to the communities that we are working in. So the Standby national team, we provide the operational support and mentoring to our standby sites across Australia. We also work on the development of resources and training, and we also have a national database which we are able to compile information for reporting to our funding body, which is the Australian Government. We are also responsible for the quality assurance of the program and its delivery across Australia. Our national team also has an advisory group which is made up of 10 members of people that have had lived experience of suicide, and this group is also representative across Australia. We bring our lived experience group together to help inform our strategic direction from a national perspective. They also help us with our research, and they guide, advise and assist with our resource development. And of course, they champion us across the country as a great standby program. We meet approximately every 2 months, our lived experience group, and we also bring them together once a year on the Sunshine Coast, where we provide some professional development and do some workshopping with them. As we've mentioned, we are a 24/7 service, but what we do is we outsource our after hours to an organisation that Susan's just put on the screen there, based in Victoria, so that those people are able to take our calls after hours. This team provide immediate support where needed, or they will pass on information to the relevant coordinator the next business day. If we do need to do support over a weekend, for example, we are able to contact our partner organisation and action any support required.
Okay, so now I thought we would go through our referral partners, and really that's the people that we receive referrals or suicide notifications from. So firstly, the first responders. So when we talk about first responders, we're talking about police, ambulance, fire, the coronial services and funeral services. So as we work over, a wide region, different states and territories and different jurisdictions, different processes for referral. So in the Northern Territory, for example, we receive referrals through the police referral agency. So when police attend a suicide, they ask those impacted whether they would like support. If those people agree, the details of those that consent to support by us are then entered into the police referral system, and our local coordinator receives an email link to a secure system where they can access the details of those requiring support and then make contact. In Queensland and Victoria, there's a similar police referral system where the police pass the details of those that consent for their information to be given to standby. And this works really well for timely support of those that are present when the police are at the scene. In South Australia, there's an agreement through the Coroner's Office and the Coroner's Constable to contact families of those impacted and ask them if they would like support, and this is done over the telephone. And again, with consent, the details are passed on to the relevant standby coordinator. In some areas, we don't have those full statewide agreements, and so we have more informal arrangements that are forged through the work of the coordinator and the relationships that they make with their local first responders. For example, in some areas, we have agreements that Standby provides training to all the new police recruits. And the training is really simply some simple presentation on the impacts of suicide and how to make a referral through to Standby. And we always prefer that the police ring us with the details of those people that have been impacted, and we can then make contact with them, because we know from our lived experience advice, it's easier to pick up the phone than to make the call. But remembering too that when we do any training or any communication with first responders, that they're likely, well, they have been exposed and they're likely impacted. So we talk about their self-care and their needs as well. We work with funeral services, generally providing information that they can pass on to people that have been impacted. But again, because of our large footprint, we try to do this at times, say, for example, at a funeral services conference.
We have suicide data registers in Australia, and they are a really useful way for us to improve our real-time notification. So the suicide registers contain detailed information about circumstances of people who it is suspected have died by suicide, together with the circumstances surrounding their death. At the time of being entered, this information being entered, it's not validated at this point by a full coronial inquiry, but it's entered by those who have the experience in the suicide sector. So just under 95% of the deaths initially judged as a probable suicide by the coroner are later confirmed by the coroner as actual suicides. So Australia is currently working towards all our states and territories having suicide registers so that the data can be shared. So having comparable suicide registers in every state and territory will improve the consistency of our data, enhance our linkages, and most importantly for us, provide real-time information so that we can make a timely response. So these suicide registers are going to be very helpful in our proactive support, and we'll talk about our proactive postvention support in a later slide. So we have mentioned our primary health networks of a way that we provide our boundaries for our standby sites, and the primary health networks are also involved in efforts to reduce suicide in the Australian community through promoting a systems-based regional approach to suicide prevention in partnership with our local hospital networks and other stakeholders. So our primary health networks are required to plan and commission services to address the needs of people at risk of suicide. As we've mentioned, Standby is funded by the Australian Government under the National Suicide Prevention and Leadership Support Program. And we work with the PHNs in providing that regional approach to service planning and integration at a local level. So we've said this a few times, we think nationally, but we act globally. Or locally, I should say, not globally.
Okay, we build relationships with our healthcare and service providers, hospital social workers, community allied health, GP networks and general service providers through our position on local suicide prevention networks, our relationship with the suicide prevention position in the primary health networks. We also run what we call our Pathways to Care workshops in different regions, where we invite all of our key stakeholders, including our first responders, to run through a fictitious scenario of suicide death in that community and explore from that first 000 call through the days, weeks and months who may be impacted and who may be potential support for those people. And everyone is able to share their potential role in supporting those exposed and impacted. We aim also to have a presence and collaborate with local agencies to run community events, and this is something we may utilise our casual workforce for things like World Suicide Prevention Day and International Survivors Day. And we also share those community events on social media as another way to communicate and collaborate. We do get direct contact from those impacted, as well as friends and family of those impacted. However, generally, we find that they have been given our information through a service provider or a first responder, usually police or funerals. We do, as I have already mentioned, we do have some difficulty with national advertising of our service, as we do not have that full national coverage. So we rely a lot on local communication and contacts to get the word out. We work with large employers, sporting clubs, churches, community groups in an effort to increase that community understanding and therefore access to our service. We definitely include all of those groups in our workshops.
So it's important that people do know about our service. So we do have a structured promotion and awareness campaigns. We have what we call a just in case, and that's a population level awareness campaign to promote the availability of our service for people who may be impacted by a suicide loss in the future. So this includes communications on standby, what standby offers, and how people and communities can access our support. So we use strategic partnerships to provide information to promote awareness of standby. And we do this through community events, community activities and campaigns. So, for example, we may attend a university orientation day. So we provide that information for the future as a just in case. We also use state and local media opportunities, as Susan said, because we don't have that national coverage to promote our service. And we like to also include stories of those with lived experience.
So I just, this table shows data for our suicide notifications. That's what we've been talking about, and referrals from the last year. You can see that the majority of referrals come from self. However, I have mentioned that often that is, yes, the individual is ringing, but it is often the police or the funeral service that have given them the contact and the information. Second, our referrals is police, and then we have community service agencies, standby staff. As I said, they're spread throughout the regions, and often they are the eyes and ears of the community. The health services and the workplace comes next. And then I also am sharing a table of the relationship of the people that have been given individual support. So this isn't all of the supports we've done. These are the people we've done the one-on-one outreach support to. And from what you can see from that list, generally it is those very close relationships and the very close contacts. The child one is reasonably low, and that's perhaps because we know why. We don't often provide support directly to children, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later in the slide. We know that from recent research, 135 people can be exposed. So our challenge is how to reach these people, and we'll talk a little bit more about how we try to do that in the next slide. So it is known that many of those impacted by suicide do not reach out or may decline the initial offer of support. So it's important to ensure that those impacted are aware of the support that Standby can provide and can access support at any time, and perhaps have a number of touch points into the service. The term active postvention applies to activities we undertake to ensure that those likely to be bereaved or be impacted are offered support. So this is done through following up each notification to ascertain who else may be impacted. So doing things like visiting the community to check in with service providers who may be impacted, but also so they can reach out to anyone that they may have come into contact with who have been impacted, or displaying standby information at community locations where the death is likely to have a whole of community impact, or being available at a community location for individuals to drop in for support as required.
So to support our active postvention, we use a just-in-time campaign. So in addition to our delivering our broad awareness, which is a just-in-case, to raise knowledge of our program, we use a just-in-time campaign delivered at a time when people are most likely to engage with the content and engage with our service. So we do this by displaying information at places where those exposed to suicide can readily access. For example, help-seeking information at funeral services or at the scene of a suicide. We promote help-seeking safety information on our social media, and we can initiate targeted responses to a specific group or a community group where we think that there might be the impact of the suicide is quite high.
Okay, and we also support the development of community postvention protocols, and that's something that's happening more and more. So particular community members are getting together to work out a postvention protocol for their own community, and we support them and assist them through that process. So often stakeholders get together to ascertain who may be impacted or exposed and who may be best placed to reach out to offer support. And again, we've spoken about the potential for the suicide to have a community-wide impact and therefore a community-wide response. So times when the community-wide impact may be a public suicide, a suicide of a well-known person in the community, a suicide that receives extensive media coverage, for example, a homicide suicide or a murder suicide, where more than one suicide occurs in a short time frame, and close-knit communities where everyone already knows one another. So a suicide there can have that community-wide impact and therefore needs a community-wide response. So some ways that we support a community-wide response is providing support options in a public place. For example, making it be known that at a community centre there's availability of support people on a particular day or a particular number of days where people can drop in. Putting help seek information on social media and regular media. And also sometimes it's a more targeted response. So if the community is, for example, a school community or a workplace community or a sporting club community or a specific demographic group community, we're also able to provide the support there. I just thought we would put up some of the resources that we have. So our standby support packs are provided to those who have access to standby support session. However, the information sheets on a range of topics are available for download from our website. And on the website as well, there's also a range of lived experience stories, because we know that it's important for those impacted to hear stories, as it helps them to realise that they're not alone. So what we thought we would do is we would just show you one of these stories. I think it goes for 4 or 5 minutes. And this is Belinda, whose son David died by suicide in 2016. And Belinda will be talking about the loss of her son and the impact on her. So I'll just let you know it does pull at the heartstrings.
I guess directly after I lost my son by suicide, I was very numb. Basically, I guess I was in robotic mode. You come to a standstill. Initially, it's a shock, but you've also got a plan, and there's a lot of things that need to be dealt with. The impact on me personally was horrific. I ended up with severe anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder. I couldn't think, didn't want to get out of bed. The rippling effect on my family was intense because I'm a single mum. And basically I had to support the rest of the family and try and keep it together while trying to deal with things myself. So it had a huge impact on me, and it did, and it still does. I was off work for a long period of time, couldn't function. I had to deal with my son's personal affairs and also deal with everything else as far as the funeral and that was concerned. So it was quite a few months later before I actually started to, I guess, feel anything. And I remember one night a girlfriend came over and had dinner with me, and that was basically crunch point. I just totally lost it, absolutely lost it. Couldn't stop crying. It just went on and on and on, and she actually rung standby. So she had a talk with them on the phone, and then they spoke to me for a good 2 hours. That's how long it took before they actually got me where I could bring myself back together. And it was from that point on, I guess, is when then I started thinking, okay, I need some support. You can have your family and friends, but to have that support of people that with the lived experience, to be around people that know exactly what you're going through, has been a tremendous support for me, with the help of the local support group that I try to attend regularly. You can just, be yourself there. You can open up, you're free to say whatever, and you're safe. Some of the challenges I actually have had is some of my friends or people that just even know me don't know what to say. Sometimes, they don't mention it at all, which I think for me personally, I would rather they did mention it, because I want my son's memory to still be alive. And I think it's important for anyone that has lost someone by suicide that you do still talk about it and talk about the person, because they were a big part of your life. That's something that the community. Which, depression, anxiety, things like that, that happen. As far as my workplace was concerned, they were really, really supportive. I don't think people realise how hard it is and the significant impact you have after you have lost someone by suicide, just trying to get back to work. It's a struggle just to get out of bed each day, let alone get up, get showered, get dressed, get in the car and actually go to work. So it's really important, I think, that workplaces understand the huge impact it has on somebody. I had many times I didn't go to work, but I was supported. My workplace was very, very supportive. You're not alone. There is people out there that do care and will support you. Pick up the phone, ring standby, get the support that you need. Don't ever feel ashamed.
I'm going to leave the little outtake on.
And this has got some of my son's ashes in the tree of life, and that's right near my heart. And whenever I sort of need the strength, I go, come on, David. And it works. Yeah. And I know you're not filming, but I'm going to kick his ass when I get up there. Then I'll cuddle him. Oh, he's in a world of trouble. You've got no idea how much trouble he's in.
So we certainly understand the importance of lived experience, and stories like this one allow people to hear from others who've had similar experiences and can have a powerful effect and show how getting help and support worked for them. And I really like this video too, because of that little part at the end. It's a beautiful example of the continuing bonds that Belinda has with her son David. Just a couple of other resources we'll just talk about quickly. When we spoke before about children and young people, we recognise that support to children and young people is best provided by someone they know and trust. So with some input from our standby workforce, our lived experience group, our advisory group, our stakeholders, including young people, teachers, parents, and other members of diverse groups, we put together these books with accompanying parent and carer notes focused on supporting children and young people after a suicide. So the books are really there to speak to the young person and to show them that this book is for them, that they are being acknowledged and there is support available.
So given that many people who die by suicide are working age adults, most of them who are employed, it is likely that a significant number of workplaces around Australia are impacted by suicide, death of an employee or a colleague each year. So a Postvention model developed specifically for a workplace can potentially reduce the uncertainty and distress, assist with preparation and leadership direction, as well as develop staff confidence following a traumatic critical incident such as a suicide death. So these resources were designed to provide a swifter return to regular service delivery and routine for people that have been bereaved or impacted by a suicide death at a workplace. Whilst other countries have produced postvention guidelines, this manual was designed to provide an Australian best practice standard for workplace postvention. It is recommended that the information in the work books be guided with existing organisational tools and management guidelines and key policies and procedures. Standby was also a member on an Australian initiative which was looking at suicide in the medical profession. It was called Every Doctor, Every Setting, a National Framework. So in response to that national framework, we designed a toolkit which was specific to the response to medical suicides. And what makes this a little bit different is that we've used specific language and terminology relevant to the medical cohort, as well as making the resource quite concise, acknowledging that the busyness of a medical environment. So there's an increased understanding for the need to conceptualise resources to specific workplaces, communities, demographic groups. So we will continue to co-design our resources with these specific groups.
And that is our presentation. I think I'll try and stop sharing my screen now, and we will be available for questions.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Susan, for such a wonderful presentation, and thank you for explaining it so well, how you take care of the people who are bereaved by suicide and explaining your structure. We have a few questions that popped into the chat, so I'll just read them out to you. You mentioned children in your presentation, that you don't directly support children. What are the best ways to support them, and is standby for all age groups, or do you kind of focus more to a specific age group?
Oh, look, I suppose maybe I didn't explain that correctly. We can support any age group, but generally when we are talking with parents, generally we're talking with parents on best how to support their children, because we come in, the child doesn't know us, and it's probably, best practice would be that they do get the support from someone they already know and trust. But that's not to say that we don't support children as well. Like, we would work with the parents on what they would like us to do, and sometimes it's where we're there with the parent and supporting them, but also we do get requests from schools as well, and we do go into schools, and we are able to provide support directly to children as well in schools. So we do have a workshop on supporting children, so and best practice around that, but I suppose we don't have the time today to go through all of those details. But
Okay, thank you. So you kind of try to support the parents to support the kids, and then try to provide a more overarching support, like in school, in terms of knowledge. Okay, that sounds really wise. Thank you. Another important topic came that a lot of the work that your organization workers do is really emotional challenging. Do you have any support, emotional support for them, and how does that work?
yeah, that's a great question, and perhaps we should have explained that as well. But firstly, our one of the reasons we do have a support team is that I suppose the load can be shared. So it's not something that the members of our support team necessarily do every day, or sometimes not even every week. We also send out our supporters in pairs, so that allows for that, I suppose, that information to be shared, and so that they don't feel that they're the one holder of that information. So another reason why they would go out in pairs, it allows them to debrief with one another, and then the coordinator, once they have finished their session, would call them and do a debrief with them as well. And we also have external supervision that is able to be accessed at any time, but definitely after 3 sessions, we do get our support team members to access that external supervision.
Okay, that sounds awesome. You mentioned that you have quite a lot of volunteers in terms of providing on-stage support, pretty much direct support for people, or are they mainly paid workers? How does that work in your organization?
Currently, we actually, all of our staff are paid. We don't utilise volunteers at all. So all of our support team that we have in the different region, they're all paid on a casual basis. So they're paid to provide the support, they're paid for their travel time, their petrol, and they're also paid for any time that they spend in training.
However, our lived experience advisory group are a volunteer group, and we compensate that group with professional development, so they can identify professional development. We will support them to do that.
That's actually interesting, because our lived experience advisory group we advertised for them, and it was for a paid position, but none of them wanted to be paid. It's actually really interesting. So instead, we're putting their pay into a pool of money that they then have access to for conferences, for professional development, for things to help them in their learnings.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's very helpful, and I think that shows which roles require what. It's important that people who are providing the actual support and do the work are the kind of position rather than a volunteer basis.
It was interesting too, because a couple of people have said, people with lived experience, that they didn't want to be paid because they felt in a way that it meant they were earning money from the death of their loved one, and they felt that they didn't want that to happen. Now, that's only some people, and I think it's important that we do offer payment when we're recruiting people. But it's an interesting thing.
Okay, thank you. Another question popped in that you mentioned getting referrals directly from the police, not only self-referrals. How did that collaboration emerge? And because in Lithuania, we encounter a lot of personal information safety issues that you don't have the like a permission and ability to disclose information to other organizations. So how does that partnership work, and in terms of disclosing this information directly to you?
Yeah, and in Australia as well, we do have privacy law. So when we get the information from the police have asked those people for permission to pass their details on. So we only get information from the police if those people that have been impacted have agreed, that their information can be passed on. So with Standby and our database, we often say that our database isn't really indicative of all of the suicide deaths that have happened. It's only those people that have consented for their information to be passed to us. So I think it's the same, legal privacy. I don't want to say constraints, because it's people's right to have that privacy. Yeah.
And then when someone enters into our program, then we gain consent to be able to then pass on details to ongoing connections. So we get consent by the police to come in, and then we get consent from the people in our program to pass on information. So yes, we're very aware of our privacy laws as well.
Yeah.
But how did that partnership with police come about? Was that easy to establish it? What type of things did you use to create that?
Yeah, look, I suppose it's different in different places. Like I spoke about the police referral system, which, for example, in Northern Territory, in Queensland and Victoria, the police already have a system. So when they go to a job that might be domestic violence, they will tick a box, and if those people do want support, and the information will get sent to the service agency that supports people around domestic violence. So they have all the categories, and suicide bereavement is one of those categories, and we are on that category. So, I mean, sort of easy for us in a way that the police actually initiated those referral systems in those particular states. However, that is not Australia-wide, and we do know in some areas, for example, it's been a bit of a long road to be able to get that full statewide agreement. So in South Australia, it's directly through the coroner's office, and it was working with the coroner's office and the coroner's constable, who now will make a call to the next of kin and ask for permission. First of all, ask if they want support, and then ask for permission to pass their information on. And that was really our approach to the coroner, and to explain why it was so important. And then that process happens. In some areas where we haven't got a full state coverage, it's difficult, because it's the local coordinator, more or less, making agreement with all the sergeants at the local police stations. So that's not ideal either.
We're about to move into a whole other state called New South Wales, where we will have state coverage, and we'll be in the process of working with the New South Wales Police to develop a relationship. So we will be getting referrals. So that will be a different process and something we haven't done before. So we can give you feedback on how that goes.
I just thought I'd add this. When we made the approach to the South Australian Coroner's Office and the Coroner's Constable, we didn't do that alone as Standby. We actually did it with other services who also provide postvention support in that state, and we also did it with the primary health networks. So I suppose we had a group of people advocating for the needs of those people bereaved, and we went en masse to have that meeting, and they certainly took that on board. Okay. And let's just say we went with the research evidence behind why it was needed as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's helpful. We'll look forward to hearing how things go in New South Wales. I hope that does go smoothly. Another question is about how the people bereaved by suicide, do they engage with the service willingly? What's your experience? Because in Lithuania, some of the people are really cautious about receiving help after being bereaved by suicide. So what's your experience, and what sort of things help kind of getting their involvement?
Yeah. And look, I suppose talking with people as well, I mean, many times people have said to me, I'm glad that you didn't just ask once, that you asked twice, 3, 4 times, because I said yes on the 4th time. Because, yeah, I suppose the stigma or whatever it is, it's hard for people to reach out. So that's one of the reasons why we always ask people when they ring us and they're telling us about someone that's been impacted, we actually say, can you ask them permission that you pass their number on to us and we can ring them? Because we know it's much easier for someone to answer the phone than to make that call to someone who they don't know who it's going to be. And it's also very important when we make that initial contact with people that we are very empathetic, very compassionate, and we say, look, we know what's happened. Here's what we can do. But again, we are only contacting people that give consent, and we also know that not everyone wants us or needs us.
Okay, so that's helpful. You also kind of get referrals from people themselves who use your service already. Okay, so
Yeah.
kind of a snowballing thing.
Yeah.
Help one person after a suicide, you can help others surrounding their death as well.
Yeah. And I think also as we increase our lived experience workforce, because, you know, people very often want to speak with somebody else who has had this experience.
What sort of proportion of your staff is kind of the lived experience workforce, and which proportion is kind of those who know how to do the work? So do you have?
We don't actually have a breakdown at the moment, but you know, I actually can't answer that. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like really important what you're saying. A lot of people feel more comfortable talking to someone who has gone through a similar thing.
Yeah.
But it's
Yes.
not a must for people to provide that support.
No, it's not a must, but I think having the option is really important for people.
And it is something that we are working on to develop our peer workforce. And as Susan said, there may be people already in our casual support teams that are bereaved by suicide, but they haven't actually disclosed that to us because it's not something we're specifically asked. But it is something we're very conscious of increasing. It's certainly a groundswell in Australia at the moment that that we're embedding the lived experience and certainly developing our peer workforce.
Great. In terms of providing support, is it more one-on-one support, or do you have, I don't know, peer support groups or something like that in some areas?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Okay, so a lot of it is either one-on-one or small groups, so like a family group or a friendship group. And then we can provide a different type of support, which is more psychoeducational information giving. So the first support we do, it's actually sitting and listening predominantly. When we do a larger group, you know, like a whole workforce or whatever, it's information giving and then being available for the one-on-one support. We don't currently have support groups, but that's another area where we really feel that we can give people a wider range of options. Not everyone wants that one-on-one. Some people feel more supported in a group. For example, perhaps men may rather be in a group type of support than a one-on-one type of support. So yes, we're in a huge sort of growth area at the moment where we're trying to really, with our increased geographic coverage, also be able to increase our suite of offerings to people, because we certainly know that one size does not fit all.
You mentioned men, and I'm wondering, in terms of the people who use your service, what's the breakdown between men and women? And do you have any specific advice how to reach men who are usually a bit wary of receiving support, actually?
Yeah. That's a great question. I would estimate that 2/3 of people that access our services would be females, and probably only 1/3 of males. It is something, again, that we are very aware of, that we know we need to do better to reach the males. In Australia, 75% of suicides are males. So does that mean that more females access services? No, it doesn't. It just means that males aren't reaching out. It is a policy platform in Australia at the moment as well, of how we can increase not only suicide bereavement, but all our supports for men to access supports. And it's one of my little projects I'm working on at the moment, to see what resources we can do to get males to actually reach out and utilise our program. So it is something I do have my eye on at the moment.
Okay. It seems it's a difficult issue everywhere and everywhere. All right. Thank you, Karen and Susan, for such a wonderful presentation. I hope we can have your knowledge and your program, snippets of it, inspire us and have something in here as well. It has been lovely having you here, and I hope to see you again in some other places, conferences, and all the best with your service provision.
Yes.
Thank you so much. It's been fantastic.
Great opportunity for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.